At my son's wedding dinner in 2023, my husband, Mark Johnson, stood up with a glass of champagne and said loudly, "Everyone, meet my new love." Then the hotel doors opened, and a woman in a green silk dress walked in, Laura Bennett, his assistant from work. The sound of forks and music froze. My son Ethan turned pale. The photographer lowered his camera. We had been married 31 years. I sat there numb while Mark smiled as if this were a toast, not a declaration of betrayal. The woman nodded politely, as though this were an introduction at a cocktail party. Inside, something cold settled in me. Not shock but clarity. "Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like if you've ever been the one your family didn't believe in." I did not cry. I did not shout. I folded my napkin along the crease, placed it beside my plate, and said quietly, "Thank you for the announcement, Mark. I wish you both the best." He blinked, startled by my tone. I reached into my clutch, pulled out a slim black folder, and slid it toward him. "You might want to read this later." My voice was calm, almost polite. Someone's spoon hit a plate. A violin trailed off mid-note. I stood, leaned down, and kissed my son on the cheek. "This is still your day," I whispered. "Do not let anyone steal it." Then I left. Calmly. Without drama. Behind me, chairs scraped, voices rose in confusion, but I kept walking. Outside, the night air was clean and merciful. The streetlights felt honest after all that glitter and deceit. Inside that black folder was everything I had built for 6 careful months. On top was a copy of our prenuptial agreement, signed in June 1992. I had circled section 14 in blue, the fidelity clause. He was the one who had insisted on it, terrified of being betrayed. Now it was his undoing. Next came the timeline. October, November, December, every lie with its receipt. Dinner at the Ivy, $248. 2 nights in Nashville, $436. Transfers from our joint savings, $1,200 in October, $800 in November. Numbers do not lie when you keep them clean. Then the screenshots. His words in gray bubbles. Friday. Same hotel. She won't notice. Keep your phone on silent. No commentary, no emotion, just evidence. After that, the attorney's letter. Dated January 19th. He had known everything from the start. We worked quietly, step by step. Beneath it was the draft petition for dissolution, already filed confidential. The clerk's stamp sat neatly in blue. Then the account summary. Joint checking, $18,442. Joint savings, $22,900 before transfers, $20,900 after. His business statements attached, proof of commingling funds. Finally, a photograph, Mark and Laura outside the Ivy. His hand where a wedding ring forbids. And a short note in my handwriting. Please direct all communication through counsel. Do not contact me personally. I drove home by the long way, past dark storefronts and yellow windows. At a red light I caught my reflection, calm, pale, unshaken. The phone buzzed on the seat beside me. Unknown number, then again. I ignored it. When it rang a third time, it was Ethan. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm driving." "Did you know? Before tonight?" "Yes." He was silent. "Do you need me to come?" "No," I said. "This is your night to be happy. Let me have mine to be quiet." When I walked into the house, the clock read 9:47. The air still smelled faintly of chamomile. A cup I had left untouched that morning. I opened my laptop. The folder marked MJ waited on the screen, divided neatly by month. No mess, no emotion, only order. An alert blinked from the bank. Transfer attempt declined. Access permissions updated. Good. The freeze had taken effect. On the refrigerator hung my grocery list: lemons, coffee, flour. I took a pen and added one more line beneath it. My money is off the table. I filled the kettle, waited for the water to hum, and watched the window fog over. Outside, the maple tree stood still and deliberate, its branches unmoved by wind. Some truths arrive as sirens. Mine came quietly like balance sheets, column by column, precise to the penny. No drama. No tears. Only numbers, dates, signatures, and the discipline to walk away from a table that had turned into a stage. That night, the seed was planted. It did not look like revenge. It looked like order. Tomorrow would be paperwork. The next day, keys. After that, the slow part. Peace. I found out about Laura by accident. Not through whispers or perfume on his shirt, but through numbers, quiet, obedient numbers that always tell the truth. Last October, I noticed $1,200 missing from our joint savings. Then another $800 2 weeks later. Mark handled the business account, but the household money was my territory. 31 years of balancing books had trained my eye to see when a line does not add up. When I asked, he laughed it off. Relax, Anne. Just work dinners. You worry too much about money. That was his favorite phrase, a shield against scrutiny. But worry is what keeps things standing. Worry pays the bills, catches the leaks, remembers the deadlines. Worry is how homes survive. So I started looking closer. On October 14th, the bank record showed a payment at the Ivy downtown, $248. The next week, another charge from a hotel in Nashville. That same night he told me he was working late, big contract meeting. The charge cleared at 11:42 p.m. I did not confront him. Not yet. I just saved everything: screenshots, receipts, reservation confirmations, call logs, photos of mileage on the car when he said he had not driven anywhere. I created a private folder on my laptop called Household Audit. I pretended not to notice when he came home smelling of cologne he had never worn before. I acted tired when he wanted to talk, as if the details of his long days bored me. He seemed relieved by my quietness, mistaking it for obedience. But I was watching. In November, a message from our credit card company appeared. A travel charge flagged for review. I called customer service and asked for itemization. 2 airline tickets to Nashville, purchased with our joint card. The passenger names were Mark Johnson and Laura Bennett. When I printed the statement, my hands did not shake. My body had already begun to move differently, slower, deliberate, factual. Shock is noisy. Clarity is silent. I remembered the first time I met Laura. She had joined his construction firm 3 years ago as a project coordinator. Tall, organized, the kind of woman who wears perfume that smells like freshly printed paper. At company picnics she was polite, efficient, invisible in the way ambitious people often are when they are still calculating what to take. Once she complimented my scarf. Classic, she said. Her smile was almost kind, almost. I had thought nothing of it. After that, small things began to change. Mark started keeping his phone face down. He shaved on weekends again. He joined a gym. Just want to feel stronger, he said. By December, he had started staying overnight in Nashville for supplier meetings. I checked the firm's calendar online. There were none. I documented everything. My notes were methodical, dated, each entry starting with time and reference number. January 12th, phone call from Laura, duration 9 minutes, 9:42 p.m. January 14th, hotel charge flagged. January 17th, cash withdrawal for $100, no record of deposit to business account. Each discovery hurt less than the last. Pain dulls when replaced by purpose. For months I went through our marriage like an accountant auditing a company on the edge of fraud. Every smile, every excuse, every vanished dollar. I began to see the structure for what it was. A partnership built on habit and paperwork, not love. But the most revealing evidence did not come from the bank. It came from the house itself. One evening, he left his laptop open in the kitchen while he went to shower. A message popped up. Laura's name at the top, a small heart beside it. The first line read, "It will be easier after the wedding." After whose wedding? I clicked before I could think. The thread went back months. She wrote about how he promised to tell her soon. He wrote about Ethan's wedding being the clean break. He had planned it, down to the date, to make his betrayal look like an inevitable chapter instead of a choice. I took pictures of the screen with my phone, one by one, careful not to leave fingerprints on the trackpad. That night I sat at my desk with the evidence spread out in neat piles, receipts, statements, screenshots. Proof not only of an affair, but of a financial pattern. Money moved out of our accounts into his business card, then to a secondary personal card I had never seen. He had created a slush fund for his double life. I remember the smell of ink from the printer, the low hum of the machine working like a steady heartbeat. In a way it was comforting. Machines tell the truth when people will not. By then I knew what I had to do. I did not want revenge, I wanted boundaries. I wanted the ledger of my life to balance again. I spent the next week in quiet preparation. I called the bank to confirm access rights. I copied statements to a flash drive and stored it in the bottom of the flower jar, where no one but me ever looked. I met twice with my accountant friend, who confirmed what I already suspected. Mark's withdrawals and transfers violated our prenuptial agreement. When I lay in bed beside him, I counted his breaths like numbers on a page. Even, predictable, careless. I thought about our first years together when we lived in a small rented apartment above a laundromat, when he still asked my opinion before buying anything, when we shared one checking account and one dream. I had spent decades building trust brick by brick, and he had sold it for dinners and hotel rooms. Still I waited. Timing mattered more than emotion. If I acted too soon, he would hide assets. If I waited too long, he would spend them. I needed precision. I began transferring my inheritance, $147,000 from my late father, into a separate trust under my name only. Quietly, legally, traceable to no one but me. I also began calling lawyers, carefully choosing my words. Hypothetically, I would say, if a spouse violates a fidelity clause, how enforceable is it? They always paused, then answered, very, if documented. Documentation was the one thing I had in abundance. By March, the house felt like an archive. Envelopes labeled by month, receipts clipped together, voice recordings saved to an encrypted drive. Every time he lied, I marked the date. Every time he said, trust me, I wrote down the hour. When I finally reviewed the folder, it no longer looked like evidence. It looked like closure. That was the moment I stopped being a wife and became an accountant again. Not for numbers, but for dignity. I balanced the books, line by line, until the truth stood clean and undeniable. And when the balance reached zero, no trust left, no debt unpaid, I knew the next phase of the plan could begin. The discovery was complete. The picture was whole. All that remained was delivery. When we married in 1992, Mark had called it a precaution. A prenup just makes things clean, he said. Protects the business. It's not romantic, but it's smart. At 25, I signed it without hesitation. Back then I believed that honesty was its own protection. The document was 12 pages long, typed on thin paper that smelled faintly of ink and cigarette smoke. I remember the pen scratching across my maiden name, and Foster, and his hand resting briefly on mine. What I did not realize then was that Mark's fear of betrayal would become his own trap. Clause 14. Fidelity. If either partner engaged in an affair, they forfeited half of all shared assets. No time limit, no expiration. Valid for the duration of the marriage and any resulting legal proceedings. He had added it after his ex-fiancée cheated on him. Back then I pitied him. Now, decades later, I thanked him for his paranoia. In January 2023, after I gathered enough proof, I called Lisa Ward, a friend from college and a family lawyer with a spine of iron. We met at a quiet cafe across from the courthouse. I laid out my evidence on the table. Printed receipts, color-coded statements, a USB drive and a clear envelope. She read everything silently, flipping pages like a judge. When she finally looked up, her expression did not change, only her tone. You have him, Anne. Completely. I remember stirring my coffee until the spoon clicked against the cup. I do not want revenge, I said. I just want what is mine. Lisa nodded. Then we proceed quietly. She built the case like an architect. Foundation first. Prenup validation check. Financial records check. Photographic evidence check. Timeline consistency perfect. By March the paperwork was ready. She filed under confidential review to prevent leaks before formal service. I signed every page with the same deliberate pen stroke I had used 31 years earlier. The night I signed, Mark sat across from me at the kitchen table, sorting invoices for his construction firm. He looked tired, unaware that the life he knew had already begun to dissolve. He asked, "Can you pass me the calculator?" I slid it to him without a word. The irony of that small motion, helping him total his own downfall, was not lost on me. In April, I moved my inheritance, $147,000 from my father's estate, into a separate trust under my name only. The trust had been dormant for years, earning quiet interest. Now it became my safeguard. Every transaction was clean. A certified transfer from the family account to the trust, with a note that read reallocation of personal inheritance funds per estate clause. Even Mark's accountant, if he ever saw it, would find nothing improper. When the confirmation email arrived, I sat back in my chair and felt something close to peace. That money represented my father's last message to me. Be careful with what you've earned. I also called the bank to add a protective clause to our joint account. Any withdrawal above $500 required dual authorization. The manager, a polite woman named Maria, hesitated. Are you sure you want that, Mrs. Johnson? It might frustrate your husband. That's all right, I said. Clarity is worth the inconvenience. While I was setting boundaries, Mark was setting traps of his own. He began talking about selling the house for tax reasons. He asked subtle questions about my inheritance, about the stocks my father had left me. He even suggested opening a family investment account under his business name. I smiled and said, "Let me think about it." Inside, I noted the date and time. Each of his questions confirmed how much he underestimated me. He thought the woman who folded his laundry still existed. He thought I was sentimental, predictable. He was wrong. The day Lisa sent me the first draft of the settlement, I printed 2 copies and locked them in my home safe, behind old family photographs. The file name was plain. House Renovation Plans 2023. I remember the sound the lock made when it clicked shut. Final metallic clean. By mid-April, everything was in motion. Lisa advised patience. Do not confront him, she said. Let him step on the stage himself. I agreed. The wedding was only weeks away. Mark would make his public move soon. I could feel it in the way he rehearsed small acts of distance, separate laundry, late nights, private calls. He was building up to the announcement just as I was building the wall he would crash into. At night, I rehearsed my own lines in my head. Not for drama but for precision. Thank you for the announcement, Mark. I wish you both the best. Simple. Final. Legally neutral. On the morning of Ethan's wedding, I stood in front of the mirror and pinned my hair up. The blue dress I wore had a high neckline and sleeves that reached my wrists, the same color I wore the day I signed the prenup. Felt like closing a circle. Before leaving, I checked my purse one last time. Lipstick, phone, tissues, and the small black folder. I placed the folder between 2 napkins so it would slide easily across the linen when the time came. When I arrived at the hotel, the staff greeted me warmly. No one could see the storm beneath my calm. Guests admired the flowers, the champagne tower, the music. They saw only celebration. But I was counting minutes, not melodies. Every second brought me closer to the moment when truth would meet audience. At precisely 7:42 p.m. Mark lifted his glass and cleared his throat. The room turned toward him. He smiled, that same confident, careless smile I had seen the first time he lied about overtime. Everyone, he said, meet my new love. Laura stepped through the doorway in her green silk dress, and the life I had already dismantled collapsed for everyone else to see. But for me it was simply confirmation. The curtain had risen exactly as planned. And somewhere, far from that ballroom, the court clerk's envelope waited in Lisa Ward's office, stamped, sealed, and ready to be delivered the next morning. That night, after the wedding dinner fell apart like wet paper, I drove home alone. I changed out of the blue dress, folded it carefully, and laid it across the arm of the chair in the bedroom. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and quiet. For the first time in years it was my house again. No voices, no excuses, no waiting for the sound of his truck. At 10:27 p.m. Headlights flashed across the window. Tires screeched in the driveway. The front door burst open before I could even stand up. Anne! His voice filled the hallway, raw and furious. What the hell was that folder? He was still wearing his tuxedo, though the tie hung loose and the buttons were undone. Sweat had darkened the fabric beneath his arms. His face was red, his eyes wild. Divorce papers, I said. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, a mug of chamomile tea steaming beside it. You announced the end of our marriage in public. I am simply following through. He froze, then gave a short, nervous laugh. That prenup doesn't count anymore. You know that, right? It does, I said, scrolling through the scanned document on the screen. Section 14. valid for the duration of the marriage and all resulting proceedings. He stared at me, trying to read whether I was bluffing, but there was nothing left to bluff. "You think you're clever," he said finally. "You think this will hurt me?" "I do not think," I said. "I calculate." He sank into the chair opposite me, the one where Ethan used to do his homework. His voice softened. "And don't do this. We can work it out. You blindsided everyone tonight. You embarrassed me in front of 200 people." "You embarrassed yourself," I said. "I just let you finish the sentence." He slammed his fist against the table. The mug rattled, but I did not move. "You don't understand," he said. "The business is in trouble. I had to make choices." "Choices," I repeated. "Like using company funds for hotel rooms? Or moving joint money into your private account?" His mouth opened, then shut again. "You went through my accounts?" "I went through our accounts," I corrected. "You left the paper trail yourself." He leaned back, shaking his head. "After everything I gave you." I cut him off. "You gave me bills to pay and explanations to memorize. 31 years of them." For a moment neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed softly. Outside, a car passed, throwing a stripe of light across the floor. He tried again, his tone softer. "You don't have to make this ugly, and think of Ethan. Think of what this will do to him." "I am thinking of him," I said. "That's why I left the reception quietly." Mark exhaled, frustrated, his voice rising again. "I'll fight you. You can't take everything. The house, the savings, the business, half of that is mine." "Half of it was ours," I said evenly. "You changed that when you chose to cheat." I opened a folder on my laptop and turned the screen toward him. Bank statements, credit transfers, hotel receipts. All neatly scanned and labeled. His own name beside Laura's in every transaction. "Stop," he said, pushing the laptop away. "You think this proves anything? You're just bitter." "I am thorough," I said. He stood up suddenly, pacing. "You'll regret this. I'll drag it out for years. You'll end up with nothing after the lawyers take their cut." I took a sip of my tea. "You'll have to pay for your own lawyer, Mark. The accounts are frozen." That stopped him. His face went pale. "What did you do?" "I called the bank this morning. Joint assets are under court review." "You can't do that without my consent." "I don't need your consent. I have evidence of breach of contract and marital misconduct." He ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. "This is insane. You're punishing me because I fell in love." "You're confusing love with possession," I said. "And I am removing myself from the inventory." He stared at me across the table, chest rising and falling, his anger struggling against disbelief. For the first time in decades, I realized he looked small, like a man whose confidence had been borrowed and suddenly repossessed. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, quieter now. "Laura just understands me." "I am sure she does," I said. "You will have plenty of time to discuss that in your apartment on the east side." "What apartment?" "The one you rented under your company name last month," I said. "I have the lease agreement. Section 3 lists you as the tenant and her as the emergency contact." He sat back down, defeated. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to stop loving you and start preparing," I said. He rubbed his face with both hands. "So that's it. That's it." For a long time we sat in silence. The only sound was the clock ticking above the sink. It was almost midnight. He finally stood, grabbed his keys from the counter and muttered, "You're cold, and..." I looked up at him. "No. I'm clear." He hesitated, waiting for me to break, to plead, to soften. I did not. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Through the kitchen window, I watched his truck reverse out of the driveway, tires spitting gravel. The sound faded until there was nothing but the quiet hum of the refrigerator again. I closed the laptop, rinsed my mug and locked the door. My hands were steady. The house finally was still. I knew he would come back with lawyers, threats, apologies, perhaps all three, but the truth was already documented, signed, time-stamped, and stored in triplicate. Tonight was only the confrontation. The real separation, the legal, irreversible kind, had already begun the moment I planted the folder on the wedding table. For the first time in 31 years, I went to bed without waiting for his footsteps in the hall. The silence felt like safety. By morning, the news had already started to circulate. I did not have to say a word. The guests from the wedding did it for me. People love a scandal they can whisper over coffee. He announced it at the dinner, they said. His wife just stood up and left. Everyone wanted to know what was in the black folder. At 8:17 a.m., my phone began buzzing non-stop. Texts, missed calls, voicemails piling up. The first call that mattered came from Ethan. "Mom, what happened last night? Dad's saying you lost it." I was in the driveway, watering the hydrangeas. The morning sun glinted off the wet leaves. "I'm fine," I said. "Your father is just facing consequences he did not anticipate." He hesitated. "He's saying you embarrassed him in front of everyone." "He embarrassed himself. I simply provided the paperwork." I could hear him exhale sharply. "He came by the hotel after you left. He was yelling at people. Even Laura left crying." "That was predictable," I said. "Mom." His voice softened. "You don't sound angry." "I'm not angry, Ethan. I'm finished." By noon, my sister Helen called. Her voice was careful, like someone approaching a wild animal. "I just got off the phone with Mark," she said. "He's telling everyone you blindsided him. Is that true?" "No," I said. "He blindsided himself. I only revealed what he had already done." Helen's loyalty had always been delicate, shifting with the louder voice in the room. But this time, something in my calm tone unsettled her. "Do you need me to come over?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Bring lunch. Ethan's coming too. We need to talk." She arrived around 2. A casserole dish clutched in her hands like an apology. Ethan followed an hour later, still wearing the wrinkled suit from the wedding. He looked exhausted, eyes red, tie gone. We sat at Helen's kitchen table. I had brought the folder. Ethan rubbed his temples. "Mom, please tell me this isn't as bad as it looks." "It's exactly as it looks." I slid the folder toward him. "You deserve to know the truth." He hesitated, then opened it. His eyes moved across the first few pages: bank statements, receipts, photographs. When he reached the messages between Mark and Laura, his hand froze. "He used the company card," he said quietly. "Yes. And he told me he couldn't afford to help pay for the wedding." "He could," I said. "He just chose to spend the money elsewhere." Ethan's jaw clenched. "He made me cover half the catering bill." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I told you not to worry about the honeymoon costs." He looked up, realization dawning. "You knew all along." "I did." Helen finally broke her silence. "And this is a lot. Are you sure you want to expose all of this?" "Families can. Families survive the truth," I said. "They die from lies." Ethan shut the folder and pushed it back toward me. "So what happens now?" "Legally," I said. "The bank froze all joint assets this morning. He has access only to his personal checking account. $3,600. The rest is under review." Ethan blinked. "That fast?" "Lisa filed the injunction at 8 sharp, I said. "Speed matters when money starts to move." He leaned back, stunned. "You planned everything." "Yes," I said. "Because he planned his betrayal." Helen gave a low whistle. "You really are your father's daughter." I looked out the window. The late afternoon light fell in long strips across the floor. Dad used to say good accounting keeps people honest. He was right. Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at it and frowned. "It's Dad." "Don't answer," I said. He looked torn. "He's going to keep calling." "He can call his lawyer," I said. We ate Helen's casserole in near silence. Every few minutes, Ethan's phone lit up again, Mark's name glowing and fading like a warning signal. After lunch, Ethan stood and started pacing. "I can't believe he did this, Mom. I defended him for years when people said he was controlling." "Control is just fear with manners," I said. He stopped pacing. "Do you hate him?" "No," I said. "Hate is heavy. I'm traveling light now." That evening, Lisa called to confirm what I already suspected. Mark had tried to withdraw money from the business account but was blocked by the freeze order. He now had to justify every expense to the court. He's panicking, Lisa said. He called my office 3 times asking for copies of the documents. I told him all communication must go through counsel. Thank you, I said. How long before the preliminary hearing? For weeks. But if he keeps trying to move assets, we can accelerate it. Let him flail, I said. He's never learned restraint. When I hung up, the house was quiet again. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, his phone face down beside him. I looked at my son, the boy who had once believed his father could fix anything. Now he was seeing what I had seen for years. That charm without truth is just manipulation. Before going to bed, I walked into my study and opened the file drawer marked 2023. Inside were neat folders labeled bank records, legal correspondence, personal notes. Every page in order, every copy verified. I ran my hand over them like a farmer checking the field after harvest. Everything was where it should be. For the first time in months, I slept without waking to the sound of imagined footsteps. By morning, the gossip had reached the office where Mark worked. Laura's name was whispered in hallways, her emails suddenly unanswered. I heard later that she took personal leave. His business partner, Paul, requested an emergency meeting to review financial discrepancies. The truth had begun its own journey now, quiet, relentless, and self-sustaining. I did not push it. I simply watched it move through the world like light through a window, illuminating every hidden corner it touched. And when Ethan called later that week, his voice steadier, he said, "Mom, I think Dad finally understands what he's lost." I told him gently, "Good. Some lessons have to be paid in full." 3 days after the wedding, Mark and Laura showed up together at Helen's house. They did not call first. Their car crunched up the gravel drive, loud and graceless, the sound of people who believed they still had power. I was in the garden with Ethan, trimming the lavender, when I saw them step out. Laura's green silk dress was gone. Now she wore jeans, oversized sunglasses, and the expression of someone realizing the wrong person had written the script. "And," Mark began, voice rough, too loud for the quiet afternoon, "we need to talk." Ethan straightened beside me. "About what?" he asked. His voice was calm, but his shoulders tightened. "About being reasonable," Mark said. "About undoing the mess you started." I set the pruning shears on the table. "The only mess here is yours." Laura crossed her arms. "You didn't have to make this so public," she said. "Everyone at the office is talking. Paul suspended us both until this is sorted." "Then it sounds like the company has higher standards than its owners," I said. Mark's face flushed. "You think this is funny? You've destroyed my reputation." I looked at him evenly. "You did that yourself when you made your announcement in a ballroom instead of a lawyer's office." Ethan stepped between us. "Dad," he said quietly, "maybe you should stop talking." Mark turned on him. "Don't you take her side. You don't understand what she's done." "I understand you humiliated my mother in front of 200 people," Ethan said. "I understand you stole from the family account and lied about it. What else should I understand?" Laura flinched. "He said the money was his," she murmured almost to herself. "It was ours," I corrected. "And now it is frozen." Laura's face shifted, something like calculation giving way to fear. "You said this would be private," she whispered to Mark. "It was supposed to be," he muttered. "She's exaggerating. The lawyers will fix it." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "You really think you can charm your way out of a legal contract?" Mark's voice cracked. "This isn't about the prenup anymore, Ethan. It's about fairness." "Fairness?" I said. "You wanted to keep your business, your accounts, and your mistress, and you expected me to keep quiet. That is not fairness. That is theft with manners." Laura took a step back. "Wait," she said. "You told me you'd paid off the mortgage. That we'd be fine even if she took half." Mark didn't answer. He rubbed his forehead, staring at the ground. "You lied to me," Laura said, her voice rising. "You said everything was settled. You said your wife didn't care about the money." I folded my hands. "He lies easily when he is afraid. You're just new to it." She turned on him. "Is any of it true, Mark? The house? The accounts? The business?" He looked up, desperate. "Laura, please. Don't do this here." She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were suddenly older. I moved across the country for you. I believed every word you said. Ethan spoke quietly. You weren't the first person to believe him. Laura's hands trembled. You told me your marriage was over years ago. You said she only cared about money. I almost smiled. If that were true, I would have left when the balance dropped below 20,000. Mark tried to step closer to me, but Ethan blocked him. Don't, he said. For a moment, all three of them stood in the middle of the garden, surrounded by the scent of cut lavender and silence. Then Laura shook her head and walked back toward the car. I can't do this, she said. I can't lose my job and my reputation because you couldn't tell the truth. Laura, wait, Mark called, chasing after her. But she was already in the driver's seat. The door slammed, the engine started, and the car rolled down the drive, leaving him standing there in his tuxedo shoes and an old t-shirt. He turned back to me. Are you happy now? No, I said. But I am free. He laughed once, a hollow sound. You always think you're smarter than everyone. No, I said. I just learned to read the fine print. He glared at Ethan, perhaps hoping for sympathy. None came. Ethan's face was pale but steady. You should go, Dad, he said. There's nothing left to talk about. Mark looked at me one last time. You're going to regret this. I already did, I said. He left on foot, walking down the road with his jacket slung over his shoulder, the picture of a man who had finally learned the cost of his own arrogance. That was the last time I saw Laura. 2 weeks later, Helen told me she'd moved back to Denver, taken her old job again, and returned the company laptop by mail. The gossip followed Mark like a shadow. His partner Paul requested an audit and discovered the same financial irregularities I had already documented. Within a month, Mark was removed as co-owner. His name came down from the office door. I didn't attend the meeting. I didn't need to. The numbers had already spoken. When the official notice arrived in my mailbox, a certified envelope with the company's seal, I made tea and read it slowly. Effective immediately, it said. Mark Johnson's ownership stake is dissolved due to financial misconduct. I folded the letter and placed it beside my files. Another line closed, another column balanced. Later that evening, Ethan came by. He leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me slice apples for a pie. Dad called, he said quietly. He's living in a small apartment on the east side. Says he wants to talk. He can talk to his lawyer, I said. Ethan nodded. You don't even sound angry anymore. I'm not, I said. Anger keeps you tied to the person who caused it. I'm cutting the rope. He smiled faintly. Mom, you've changed. I've corrected the books, I said. Everything balances now. The oven timer dinged softly. I placed the pie inside, shut the door, and wiped my hands on a towel. Outside, the evening air smelled of lavender and clean slate. Some endings arrive with shouting. Others with silence and paperwork. Mine arrived with both and then peace. The divorce was finalized on February 12, 2024. The judge's signature at the bottom of the decree looked almost delicate. A small curl at the end of a 31-year sentence. There were no outbursts in the courtroom, no raised voices, no tears. Just the shuffling of papers, the click of a pen, and the sound of my own steady breathing. Mark left with what he had come into the marriage with. His pickup truck, the tools from his workshop, and $12,300 in his personal account. I kept the house, the retirement fund, and 70% of the joint assets. $480,000 after taxes and legal deductions. When the hearing ended, I thanked the judge for his time and walked out into the cold February air. Snow was falling lightly, the kind that melts the moment it touches the ground. Lisa Ward met me on the courthouse steps with a small smile. You did it, she said. No, I answered. I ended it. She handed me the official envelope. Keep this somewhere safe. I nodded. I already have a system. That evening, I opened a new account under my own name. No joint access, no linked cards, no history. When the banker slid the documents across the desk, she asked if I wanted to list a beneficiary. Yes, I said. My son. But only after my death. She hesitated, then smiled softly. Understood. The following week, Mark's name disappeared from every utility bill, every insurance statement, every title. Bit by bit, His presence faded from the paperwork of my life until all that remained were clean lines and my own signature. News traveled fast in our small town. People who had looked away during the scandal now nodded at me in the grocery store with quiet respect. I did not gloat and I did not explain. I had nothing left to prove. Paul, Mark's former partner, called one afternoon to inform me that they had completed the audit. "You were right about the missing funds," he said. "He used business money for personal travel and gifts. We reported it to the board." "Thank you," I said. "I don't need to know the rest." He paused. "You've handled this with more grace than most men I know." "Grace," I said, "is cheaper than revenge." I meant it. I did not want him punished. I wanted him irrelevant. By spring, I had turned my attention to something that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind for years. A dream I'd always postponed for someone else's convenience. I applied for a small business grant and used part of my settlement to open Riverbend Bakery, a modest shop in a renovated brick building by the old bridge. The first morning I arrived before sunrise. The air smelled of flour and yeast, and the ovens glowed like small suns. I wore an apron embroidered with my initials, AJ, simple and final. I baked 20 loaves of sourdough, 3 trays of cinnamon rolls, and a batch of lemon tarts. By noon they were gone. The register read $1,903 in sales. It was not the money that mattered. It was the sound, the soft ring of the bell above the door, the murmur of customers, the laughter of children tasting sugar for the first time that day. It was the hum of life returning to its proper rhythm. Ethan stopped by that afternoon, holding a bouquet of tulips. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said. "I'm proud of you too," I answered. "You handled all of this better than I ever expected." He smiled. "Dad called. He said he's trying to start over." "I hope he does," I said. "Everyone deserves the chance to rebuild, as long as they start with truth." Ethan hesitated. "Do you ever miss him?" I wiped flour from my hands. "I miss who I thought he was. But that man never existed." He nodded slowly, then looked around the bakery. "You look peaceful." "I am," I said. "Sometimes losing everything you did not need is the only way to find what you do." That evening after closing, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The river below the bridge moved quietly under the moonlight, steady and patient. I thought about how water erodes stone, not with force but with persistence. Truth works the same way. On the counter beside me lay a single folded piece of paper, the final bank statement from our joint account, now at zero. I traced the numbers with my fingertip, not with regret but with closure. When I locked the bakery for the night, the bells chimed softly above the door. Outside, the air smelled of yeast and rain. I turned off the lights one by one until only the sign in the window remained. "Open tomorrow 7 a.m. At home, I placed the divorce decree in the top drawer of my desk, beside the folder marked MJ. I no longer needed to open it. The numbers were balanced. The records were complete. I poured the last of the chamomile tea into my favorite mug and stood by the kitchen window. Outside, the garden had begun to bloom again. The lavender had survived the winter. For the first time in years, the house felt neither empty nor lonely. It felt mine. I took a slow breath, the kind that fills every corner of your chest, and whispered to the quiet room, "My money is off the table. My peace is not." Then I turned off the light.